One.
All right, hello everyone. Hello, ladies.
Hi.
Welcome. Hi. Welcome to our HeadWrap podcast. This segment, which is our sixth one, is about my Sheroes. So, Black Women Work began as an online space for Black women to share challenges and successes. And you can find us at www.blackwomenwork.com. We're also on Facebook, and you can follow us or please subscribe to us on YouTube. But we are an affirming space for us to love on each other, express ourselves, and cheer each other on. We are navigating so much, especially during pandemic, with our families, children, partners, spouses, careers, dynamics around both race and gender, all while trying to live our best lives. We have a lot going on. And we decided to, bring some of these issues to podcast. And we're excited to share, like I mentioned before, our sixth episode of My Sheroes. We will discuss the characterizations and personifications of a Shero, and even the use of the word Shero. We'll get into that discussion as well. But to start things off, we'll do introductions. My name is Keisha Chambers. I'm a wife, I'm engineering project manager, entrepreneur, Black fiction reader, and a lover of red wine. And through these introductions, ladies, what I also want us to do is share our superpower. So my superpower is my smile, please. So can we start the introductions? Erica, why don't you start?
Hi, everyone. My name is Erica Merritt. I am an entrepreneur, a wife, a mother, a lover of science fiction, and an unwavering advocate. I don't even know what I was just saying. I am an unwavering advocate for racial justice. I really am. Don't know why I can't get it out.
Felisa, why don't you go next?
Sure. My name is Valisa Turner Howard. I am a wife, a mother, a lawyer, an entrepreneur, and I am someone who really and truly believes that a space like Black Women Work is needed and necessary for Black women to have a safe space, to be who we are, to love on each other. And my superpower is practicality. Michelle.
Hello, everyone. I'm Michelle Felder to many, and sometimes Minnie Malcolm. I am passionate about racial justice. I'm a cheerleader for women entrepreneurs, a loyal friend, a world traveler, a foodie, and a lover of great conversations with loved ones over burden. Over burden? Yeah, Erica, I'm picking
That
up
too.
from you. Over bourbon.
Contagious.
And my superpower is faith.
Oh, I realized I
Erica,
didn't share my
yeah,
superpower.
share your superpower, Erica.
Okay, so my superpower is naming and taming elephants through facilitation. So I support people to have tough conversations and name the thing and be able to talk about it and work on it.
Okay, taming those elephants. I love that.
I like
I
that.
love
Man,
that.
maybe we should change that on our website.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. Well, it says facilitation.
Yes, it does, because they're one word superpowers.
Mm-hmm.
You know what, ma'am? I can have as many words as I want to.
No.
The elephant tamer is pretty amazing.
But if I say that without an explanation, people won't get it. So that's not what we have on the website for that reason.
Okay.
Well, great, great. Well, we all have some type of superpower, which thus makes us heroes in our own right, I believe. But what we're going to do today, as mentioned before, just kind of discuss the concept a little bit more about Sheroes, discuss some characterizations. But let's jump in first with one superhero that I wanted to kind of highlight. This is Gwendolyn B. Bennett. I have a poem I'm going to share from her. And she was a Shero of the Harlem Renaissance. So Bennett was a poet, a journalist, a writer, and an encourager. She founded the Harlem Circle, which was a space for African-American writers to come together to share ideas and inspire each other. So very much what I feel like Black Women Work is all about, coming together and inspiring each other. And though considered taboo, she was one of the first writers to write about lesbianism, but she married a white man. So she definitely had some complexities, but she was a true trailblazer and Sheroes. So the poem is A Dark Girl. I love you for your brownness and the rounded darkness of your breast. I love you for the breaking sadness in your voice and shadows where you wayward eyes laid rest. Something of old forgotten queens lurks in the lithe abandon of your walk, and something of the shackled slave sobs in the rhythm of your talk. Oh, little brown girl, brown for sorrow's mate, keep all you have of queenliness, forgetting that you once were slave, and let your full lips laugh at fate. Okay, thought that was a beautiful one for this Sheroes discussion. So ladies, how does that poem speak to you related to the Shero?
Well, when I read it and listening to it again, there's something about it that sort of it makes me feel proud, and there's a sadness to it at the same time. And I think in a lot of ways that feels indicative or descriptive maybe of the experience of Black women in this country, right? It links us back to our ancestors, linking us back to the continent, this idea of experiencing queendom or queenliness, and at the same time the challenging, or in many cases tragic, story that we have here in this country, but not to lose the resilience that we've displayed, and um, the way we've often built something out of very little, over and over and over again. So one of the things that amazes me about Black women for sure is our ability to take not a what seems like not very much and make something amazing out of it. So that's what it brings up for me as I hear it again.
Excellent. I love all the keywords, the challenge yet tragic stories, resilience, building from something out of nothing. Awesome points. Anybody else have a?
It just left me wondering, having a question of what she meant by the use of queen. So I was very curious as to in what reference was she, and I was trying not to make inferences, but yeah, I was curious as to the matter of what she sees us as coming from or being queens.
And from my reading of this poem, just some of the commentary and other authors' reflections, it was how we were queens before we came to this country. So
okay, so okay, that's what I thought, but we weren't all queens, so that's a whole nother podcast.
Right.
So it's like a a mythology in of itself.
Mm-hmm.
All women in Africa are not considered
queens.
queens
Right.
at all. So yeah, so I would take a point with that. But the other reference of us being queens, of thinking of ourselves in that way as royalty,
Mm-hmm.
as that, yes, but no, factually speaking, we were not. All of us.
So I was in the same boat as Erica. It's reading it or listening to it, it's sad. It feels sad, but if you look at the word, she's talking about resilience. She's talking about, yeah, you tried it, but I'm still here. I've still beaten, the odds. And so that's it's a double-edged sword.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because yes, we are from a strong ancestry of queens. So we might not all have been queens, but at least we've seen what a queen looks like. There was probably the mother of the tribe or the queen of the tribe. So we had that to emulate. And then we could all then bring forth that queenliness. And our everyday, and acknowledge that our ancestry, and knowing that that is a part of our history, that we can do all things. We can be resilient. We can have pride. But I think also one thing about this that I want to kind of also start off talking about is just this concept of Shero and the word in itself. Shero was trying to kind of be a feminine version of hero, but I kind of want to push back on the creation of words that are created to define our gender. Because basically, I think there's more to it. It puts us into maybe category. It could be limiting. It could be just more specific than the broader word or broader use of hero. So I just want to also have that discussion because we can showcase what we're about in many, many ways. So when you look at that definition of hero, I just look it up in the dictionary. It doesn't even use gender. It refers to a person or a figure or a character. There's no gender specification. But somewhere along the way, instead of pulling out the HER, in hero, because that gender is already there, people focused on the HE and made it more of a male feeling word. So I just want to talk about that a little bit, ladies. What do you think about the female kind of personification of words? Lately is Shero and her story. Do you think that women need a separate word to define our contributions or to showcase our contributions?
I think we do. But I also think that although hero isn't defined with a gender specification, how it has been used historically has been very gender aligned. So there was a time when women were not considered to be heroes, although the word was not it's gender neutral as it's defined. And when we spoke of and when we learned of heroes often, and I'm speaking not just of my experience, but past experiences of other people, they are often and most always aligned with men. So that's probably how it became a need to say the Shero, taking play with the word because of hero and how we used it. Not necessarily how it was defined, but the examples that we were fed and given about who heroes are, even in the fiction side of things with super characters or those were all aligned with men. They were not women. So yes, I do think that it's a good thing to have it and a good thing to talk about history and her story, because it is, I mean, you could say our story, but no, I think her story is important because her story gave birth to all of his stories. Because without the her, there is no hims or hers or theys or thems.
I think it's an appropriate modifier, just like how some people take issue with saying Black hero, or it's necessary.
What is that, Elisa? What is it?
A modifier is, they'll say, why can't you just call everyone a hero? Why do you have to say a Black hero?
Oh, a Black hero. Okay. Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, it's the same sort of concept to me. It's because, as Michelle said, in the past, the word has been used to describe a certain person, not just male, but also white. And so we have to modify it so that we can also be included, because when people think of the word, they may go directly to white male in a cape, and we want them to know, no, there are other people who should be included here. And so we come up with our own modifier for what it is, define it for ourselves.
Yeah, for me, I think it just brings up the limits of language and the fact that we are living with a language that has held men as the default. So and that shows up in a lot of ways, right? I always think about guys as an example of that, where
you guys,
absolutely, you can refer to a group of women as you guys, and they're going, in most cases, not going to take issue, in most cases, or a mixed gender group. But if you say gals to a group of men or a mixed gender group, not going to go over in the same way. So we have a lot of perceptions and sort of ties to gendered language. And I don't think there's anything wrong with being very specific. And I also kept thinking about the word heroine as well, if we're talking about, the idea of having a shero.
Not the drug.
Definitely not the drug.
Just point of clarification.
The people know what I'm talking about.
I understand they do. I just was making sure.
Do they?
Right.
That was a good point of clarification.
Just making sure. No
Doesn't
worries.
hurt, doesn't hurt. And so to that point, even interesting how we have heroine and shero, because in essence, they are defining the same type of person. But we have these two words for that. Because my first thought was hearing shero, maybe it drew a difference between the two. Of course, we know it's male, female, but what other differences does it possibly draw when you add the gender? So if, to your point, Erica, we are typically more gender pushed towards male, does this then change the perception of shero? That is it less than, or are they doing different things to be sheroes, or maybe the male is expected to do more to earn that title, maybe the woman not so much? So that was kind of, any thoughts on that?
I don't think it does. I think it just specifies who we're talking about. I don't think it diminishes whatever the activity or the event that brought upon us using bestowing that word or title to that person. A firefighter running into a building to save someone coming out on the end. If it's a male, and we're just speaking, of course, right now in male, female, or boy, girl terms. If it's a male, then it's a hero. And if it's a girl, it's a shero. Same activity, same event.
I guess I also related to that in terms of the binary. You're saying firefighter makes me think about the transition away from gender terms in general, right? So many of the things that we used to say, like garbage man or policeman, or just like just said, firefighter, fireman, that there's a way that a lot of that language has evolved to be gender neutral and to really speak to the thing itself. I mean, that gets a little tricky with hero because obviously there is a he in hero.
Her and hero.
There's also a her in hero, but it's the pronunciation, because we don't say hero. So, I mean, we could say hero and hero.
We could.
But the English language dictates us to pronounce that as a long E.
Right.
Because what is the rule? Because it's before that consonant, that hard R.
Now you're asking me to remember something.
It's hero. But yeah, I think we do. But I think that started long ago. Well, I say firefighter because that's the way I've always used the term. And that's only because I grew up, my stepdad was a firefighter. So fireman was never used in the house because that's not how they describe themselves. They were firefighters at the station. So that's why. But I tend to do neutralize the gender out of words that are, I was having dinner the other day and somebody said our waitress, and I said, it's not the waitress, it's the server. Like that's just, that's been with me for a while before our evolving into understanding and recognizing people who are binary or don't want to identify as either the male or female connotation of the word. So To me, it's
Yep,
just
I
respect.
definitely.
It's more to recognize that it's not a male thing or it's not a woman thing. Whatever the thing is, it can be anybody doing it.
Mhm.
Yep, and definitely been trying to be more cognizant of that, making things more gender neutral. You know, as a council person, you know,
And
as a
probably
Yeah.
not all.
councilman.
I
Yeah.
went to all girls school, so those type of things were at the, a part of the education,
Mhm.
and not subtracting women from the position or the title or whatever it was.
Mhm.
That's how we were. Yeah, it's a part of the culture.
Which I think is interesting. So the way that not leaving women out of the story and the sort of evolution of that language now lends itself to honor people who are on that gender spectrum as well.
Mhm.
Absolutely, absolutely. So now we're just going to move a little bit more the direction towards maybe some differentiations or different
I
Your turn
started
now.
expectations.
it.
I
I
know Erica
started it,
started it.
right?
She started this tongue
Elisa, you're up
tying.
next.
And so even looking at it like at once, and hopefully we are transitioning away from the gender specificity of these words, and right, they were done to modify so everybody can be included, but we can still continue that continuation at some point. Or do we need to continue that modification so everybody is included? Do we just get to a point where everybody is just neutral? It's just hero and it covers everybody. But we're gonna park that, right? We're gonna park that conversation. But I want to just touch on Black women in this word and this use of shero, because I think traditionally, maybe, or historically is probably a better word than traditionally, but historically, for the Black woman to be recognized as a hero, strong leader, whatever that may be, she needed to be smarter, more creative, more persistent. She had to have a superpower list that was way longer than our one word that we gave. And that just to be, a little better than, maybe her male or female counterparts. Um, when on the other hand, white man, he just shows up, he could be considered a superhero. And one example that always just rubs me wrong is when somebody says, oh, he's a great father. He takes care of his kids. I'm like, well, that's what he's supposed to do. That doesn't make him a hero or great. He just showed up that day. So let's not, give him any more than the fact that he just showed up. Whereas the woman, she's, not only the great mother, but she's also the community leader. She's also the church mother of many. So there's so many more things that maybe women are expected to do in order to earn this shero title. So what do you ladies think makes a shero? And what are some of those characteristics? Do we have different expectations as Black women, as far as being these sheroes in our community?
So I'm going to say that I would probably push back on a part of that. And I really think that it depends on the lens that's looking onto the shero hero person. So the having to put on the triple cape or be super, super strong or show superior intellect, better, bigger, smarter, all of those things. I think that really is more of an external lens coming into the community if we're talking about Black people, because I don't require that of a Black hero, or if we're using the word hero and shero. It's like I said, the firefighter going into the building, if it's Black or white, I don't think that the Black firefighter needs to have gone in faster and gotten out faster than the white in order to be considered a hero in that perspective. I don't put that type of judgment or requirement upon Black people to perform in any way differently than, if anything, no, I don't. I don't at all. And I was going to say, if anything, the qualifications could be lessened because of all of the external things that go into um, us being just survivors, just being here. And it, on top of surviving being a Black person in, here in the US, we're contextualizing all this about America. So you then did that. So it's like, that's like superhero or super shero.
Superhero.
Right. There you go. So no, I don't think so at all. I think it's an external lens. And then the fathers thing that you mentioned, that's even segmented down to race, because it's really a surprise, an anomaly if it's a Black father who, was there to take care of the, like, that gets even another layer of like men in general being fathers and doing what they're supposed to do. But then the perceptions and the stereotypes and lies about, Black fathers, that's even another layer to that to me. It's really a shock if you see a Black man walking down pushing a kid in a stroller.
As I'm listening to Michelle, I'm thinking about the whole idea of the white gaze, and in this case, like the white male gaze versus the looking through our own lens, and then I'm also thinking about the way we internalize these messages. So when do we also drink that Kool-Aid? And when do we have to unpack whether or not we're drinking that Kool-Aid? So in other words, when are we the ones who are also like, oh, he's watching his kids, or right, or she did, these 50-11 things. And I keep thinking about the whole twice as hard, half as much. And how and when we might feed into that. But when you first asked the question, Keisha, one of the things that came to mind was how, I think I'm getting this saying right, that necessity is the mother of invention.
Yes.
And I think that I know countless Black women that I would think of as sheroes. And I think that so often, because of that pressure and because of that socialization that at least some of us receive, I definitely got the twice as hard, half as much messages. Then we work ourselves into a frenzy around all of the things that we need to accomplish and all of the things that we need to be. And frankly, because of capitalism, like what we need to produce and that our worth is then tied to those things. But I could just, there's so many Black women that I think of who are doing amazing things in the realm of, their families and their careers and their civic life, and often their faith community as well. And, doing all of those things in amazing ways that I would say, I mean, and they don't have to necessarily be operating all four of those spaces, and there are probably others as well that I'm not naming in order to be perceived by me as someone who's doing amazing things or to be perceived as a shero. But I think that, I guess what I'm trying to say is I think we maybe in some ways are more prone to lean into those things because of some of our socialization, and to feel like it is our duty, it is our responsibility to be doing all of those things.
Yeah, I immediately thought of like the Talented Tenth and the, to be the best, you got to be twice as good as all that stuff that comes up.
Come through, Du
Um,
Bois.
yeah, right. And how, and I think you were getting at this earlier, Keisha, the perception is we have to do way, 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 way more than our white counterparts or than men, perhaps, um, to get the moniker Shero. And is that fair? And is that right? And I tend to believe that, um, especially the older I get, that no, we don't have to do all of that stuff. That you know, you could, as Michelle said, you could do one thing, run into the house and get the. You're not even a firefighter. You're the neighbor, and the house is on fire. You run in there, get the kid, come back out.
Mhm.
You're a hero. You're a Shero. It doesn't take all of that, and that we have to decide for ourselves, define for ourselves who is a hero and who is not.
That was a hero move. That was a Shero move right there.
Mhm.
Right there
Mhm.
in real time.
Real time. And I like that, Release. We have to define, what that is, and we should start giving those titles out more. And maybe that's a part of us as a community to start recognizing who these people are in our community that we see as heroes. And maybe it's not the person who the external, lens may see as a hero, but from our own internal lens, as Michelle said, let's recognize, the lady on the block that picks up the trash up and down the street every week. Let's recognize, or even the man that he doesn't just, shovel his sidewalk, but shovels other people. Those are definitely our community heroes, sheroes, that we should start recognizing more. Then maybe through that, we as a community can redefine that. Because another point that Michelle said, I mean, just us showing up and doing the work, that's already cake number one, because we've had to survive so much in this here world. And then to add on to that, whatever our, talents and strengths and, education is, just as our second cake that we're delivering to the world. But in that defining of what a Shero is, I just started thinking about, different people, just, people in the world that do great things. Michelle Obama is definitely a Shero, Shirley Chisholm. We have some really great role models and Sheroes as Black women that we can look up to. But then I just started thinking about, from that external lens, as we mentioned, they've tried to personify, Black women, some certain characteristics, and tend to make that more of, it's not a Shero to them, but I think to us in our community, we could possibly see them as Sheroes. And so that negative, I think, characteristic also kind of ends up living in infamy. It becomes its own thing, its own person. And some of the ones I'm speaking of are, that welfare queen. And I know these are negative, but I want to also point out what's positive about them and maybe then change that norm or that conversation. But welfare queen, Aunt Jemima, the video vixen, there's even more. And it even got to a point where, yes, Aunt Jemima, has that negative connotation. She was on the side of a, food material, but what she was about, she's a mother figure, she takes care of everyone. She has unconditional love, and how Black women a lot of times show their love was through cooking. You fed your family, you were the provider in that way. So can we just have that discussion then about, these unsung heroes, Sheroes, so to say, they were given this negative connotation from, externally, but they have all these positive traits. And how can we then, amongst us, make sure we always pull out the positive traits? You know, what are some of the thoughts on, these characters? Because they are characters. They aren't a true person, but I think there's a little bit of these people in everyone. What are some of your thoughts on these characters? Pick one. Let's talk about it. Welfare queen, Aunt Jemima, video vixen.
So I'll go. I mean, immediately, they're tropes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I immediately, when I think of Aunt Jemima, particularly original Aunt Jemima, and not like feathered Aunt Jemima, I think about it's a mammy character, and it right. So she's rotund. She is desexualized, and so in that mother figure there's some other stuff bound up in it, right? Like there's some fat phobia bound up in there. There's all kind of stuff bound up in that characterization. And I think it's interesting to think about the difference between how we depict those characters and how those characters are depicted when they're in the sort of mainstream space versus whether we're talking about like fictitious characters in books written by Black folks, or even film or theater, other things, versus how those characters are depicted when white folks are the ones behind the camera or behind the pen. And so I think we think about those people differently. Like the mammy could absolutely be Big Mama in
Mm-hmm.
some of our families, right?
Yeah.
And we don't and the way that we perceive, I mean, Big Mama is revered.
Mm-hmm.
Big Mama is Big Mama. I think when I think about Big Mama, I think about my Aunt Doll, who was my aunt that I lost last year. It was 97 years old, and there was no one more important in my world, right? No one more wise, no one more revered. And also understanding that she was a woman who lived a full life, right? That involved men, and given the fact that she had children, right, at
Mm-hmm.
some point involved sex, and right, that she had a whole life
Mm-hmm.
attached to that. And so I think the way we tell our stories and the way we depict uh our people is often very different than when someone else gets to do that.
That's exactly what I was going to say, is that, all of the tropes that were just mentioned, we probably all know somebody who it could have been modeled after, but that's somebody else's lens on us. That's not our lens on us. And that's them showing, telling their story or putting their stereotypes on what our families and our home situations look like, but it's very exaggerated and very over the top. In some cases, some people's Big Mama is like Aunt Mama. I don't know, but the point is, and I keep going back to this, it's not our story, it's a story that somebody else has created and put on us. And so we have to make our stories and tell our stories for ourselves, um, and reject the stories that are being put on us.
I don't think I have anything different to say.
I'll just add really quickly, and I know this is a little bit different, but as Valisa's talking about who gets to tell the story, or like what's the narrative, it makes me think about who do we see as a hero and who do we get given to us as sort of acceptable. And so I think about like the story of Claudette Colvin versus the story of Rosa Parks. And
Right.
not that I think of them both as Sheroes, right? Based on this categorization, or the way that we're talking about this, absolutely. But, one of them was perceived as more respectable than
Mm-hmm.
the other in the way that was pushed pushed out, right? And the narrative around that,
Right.
versus I think when we understand a full story, how we perceive and value people. Because Claudette Colvin was a badass as far as I'm concerned, right? But we don't get to hear her story in the same way, or we didn't. I think that has shifted, but I think historically we did not. I didn't learn about her, but I learned about in school, right? But I learned
Mm-hmm.
about Rosa Parks.
Right.
I definitely agree with that. It's part of what fuels, you know, my coming up with the concept of cotton blocks, of telling the story. Claudette is a mask, in my collection. yeah, those names that are, you know, that are sheroes and heroes in their own right, but they don't, I say that they're not the, you know, the Black History fold, the Black History Month fold of folks. So for various reasons, I think some intentional and then some just unintentional. And the sheroes, period, within our own Black historical context, how we have been set aside to the male, the patriarchs of the movements that have happened over history, and not just here in the United States, but around the globe, how the male leaders, quote unquote, are the ones that are put into the spotlight, and the ones that make the papers, the ones that make the reports, the news, and ultimately are the ones that end up in the history books in the context. However, you know, it seems like history always has had to course correct itself to acknowledge women, period. And that's just across all, I think, ethnicities and races and cultures. Not all, I should say the majority. I would say 99. There are some cultures that are existent where the woman is the central and the focus and the lens, but those are very, very, very small in size and exposure to us in mainstream.
Isn't that an interesting contrast? So to think about the leadership of the civil rights movement, that at least, right, outward facing or who's held up, and the movement for Black lives.
Right.
Like that juxtaposition is fascinating.
Yes.
Where you have absolutely, you know, Black women very much centered, specifically Black queer women, very much centered versus the, you know, historically the Black male guard, if you will.
And religious guard too.
And the religious and the response. The varied responses that are.
Absolutely. Well, and the hierarchical structure versus the more distributed structure, or the sort of shared power model.
Yes.
Well, the leaderful model.
The leaderful model, right. Yeah. And they all have their benefits and they all have their deficits.
Surely.
Each, I should say, has its.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've had a great discussion, not only defining shero, is it a gender-based word? You know, can we reclaim it? Some of the different thoughts about how society has had something or defined something as negative, yet in our own community, through our own lens, it's definitely positive. So great discussions there. I hope maybe some of our listeners have retuned their thoughts on maybe what a shero is, specifically a Black shero. And, you know, why did I even say the Black term? Just a shero, you know, maybe they retuned that. So what I do want to do is just end on an opportunity for all of us to reflect on who our sheroes are, you know, talk about them. How did they impact our lives? Why did we choose them? Did they choose us? I think in some instances. And how do they shape how we even view the world? So let's have that discussion. Let's kind of just brag on some of our sheroes. Anybody want to start?
Well, one of my sheroes, and I have several, but we'll just, for the sake of time and sharing, would have to be my Aunt Cheryl, who is no longer with us. But she is one of my sheroes. So I could say that we were chosen because we're family. So I didn't necessarily choose her and she didn't necessarily choose me. But she's my paternal aunt, so my dad's sister, one of his sisters. And Aunt Cheryl is a shero of mine because she was always someone who I could gaze up at, you know, like literally physically and like figuratively. Like, I mean, she was taller than me. So when I say physically, I don't mean that, but literally could watch her at home and just, you know, kind of sit there like, one of those types of moments, and always just admired her. I considered her to be a professional student, a professional learner, one of the smartest people that I knew growing up, always seemingly in college earning a degree, um, and very eclectic in taste and very artful and crafty and all things that, are a part of what actually make up the Michelle that folks know and hopefully love. But yeah, difference in level of style and presentation, but still that very much individuality, very much culture and artistic forward, and she's just the best. Very understanding and listening and sharing an opinion that she could contextualize from a world view, a local view, and her own personal view, and amazing conversationalist, and just great. And she's the mother of my only cousin on my dad's side, who is my favorite cousin on my dad's side, is my only, and born on my birthday. So that's my Aunt Cheryl.
Yay, Aunt
And
Cheryl.
her picture is right, there's two pictures of her right behind me.
Superhero.
Mhm.
Thanks for sharing that, Michelle.
Absolutely.
So I'll go next. My Shero is my mom. She left for the military right out of high school to make something of herself and do something different. And while she was in the military for 27 years, she earned a bachelor's degree, several master's degree, a PhD. She got married. She had 3 kids, um, and really, went far and above anything that had her parents had done. Neither of her parents finished high school, maybe not middle school. Um, and they both wanted more for all of their kids. And she was always striving, always trying to do better. And she instilled that in me and my sisters, in that education is important. And also giving back to your community is important. So now that she's retired, she's become a professional volunteer. She's very engaged in the community, also a politician for a little while. She was on the school board and all that kind of thing. And so I've always looked up to her as someone to emulate and um, do the things that she has done for herself and for her community and for her children. Um, and so my mother is my Shero.
Love it. Thank you, Elisa. Erica.
Yeah, so my mama, Doris Louise Merritt, is also my Shero. And my mom is no longer with us. She passed on in 2008, but she is still with me in so many ways. She is with me when I look in the mirror, and I feel like I look more and more like her every day. She is with me when I buy things that are sparkly, that I like. I was one of those people. I was like, I will never wear sequins and all that. And I find myself drawn to these sparkly things. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I can't believe I'm buying this. And and I'm like, I love it. I love it. My mom, when I so my mom never even finished high school. And she was honestly one of the hardest working people that I've ever known. She was a homemaker for many years. So for a good portion of my childhood, my mom intermittently worked here or there part time, but for the most part was home with me and really was my first teacher. So when I went to school, I already knew how to read. And that was because my mother poured into me and really she really cultivated my love for reading, my love for the arts. She took me to museums and to to exhibits, and to theater, and I had all of these experiences that my mom did not have. So she wanted to make sure that those were things I got a chance to do, even though those were maybe not things that she did. So those were the things that her and my dad, I was in all of the things. I literally, any activity you can imagine a kid would want to do, they let me try it. The rule was that you had to finish. So if you signed up for it and you hated it and it was 6 months, then you're gonna be doing whatever it is, swimming, gymnastics, whatever, for 6 months. But more than anything, one, the love I have for other people and the openness that I have, and really just being drawn to people as human beings, comes from my mother. My mom did not put any limitations around race or sexual orientation or any of those things. She, of course, probably didn't have the language that we have now, but was just always somebody who was very open. And she was also very practical, which in some ways I am not, but I'm trying to lead into some of those things at times. So she was the person who can make $1 out of 15 cents. And, there's so many, I feel like there are so many times in so many ways that my mother loved me more than I deserved, unconditionally. I shouldn't say more than I deserved, more than I felt like I deserved at those times. And so I try to extend that same like unconditional positive regard to my kid. So that's my mom, and she's my Shero, and she's in my head. So that people are like, what would Jesus do? There's so many instances where, especially when I want to like flip out, where I'm like, what would Doris do? And that's what brings me back.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Erica. My Shero is also my mother, Joanna Johnson. She was an entrepreneur. So she and my father owned a business, but my mother's side of the business was all about textiles. She is a wonder with the sewing machine. She can make anything. She made a coat for me one time. She has reupholstered so much of my furniture. So when it comes to that sewing machine, she's a badass. But her part of the business wasn't just textiles as far as just fabric. She made sandbags, plastic bags, mail bags. They were featured in Black Enterprise, all the different minority entrepreneur awards or programs. I've been to numerous ones of them. So very proud of her and my father's accomplishment, but her side was mostly the textiles. And she too was not a college graduate at the time. She, with her high school education, jumped right into starting that business along with my father. But yes, she was determined. So she made sure she graduated before I did. And literally the day before my graduation from college was her graduation from college. She took that love of entrepreneurship and created a program with Dallas Community College System where high school students could get some college credits and also make sure they got scholarships. So she set up a program. She ran that for at least 10 years, but always very involved in encouraging people to be entrepreneurs. She was very proud of us as a race. I learned a lot of Black history from my mother. That's why my interest is in history, where I am and knowing what Black folks have done just in the community that I'm in and that I support. Definitely comes from her. She grew up in small town, Texas, went to the Negro high school. So a lot of that history is there just from talking to her. It was pretty amazing to be able to hear those stories. But that is, she's my Shero. Yeah, definitely. So much to share. But I think the point of this, and ladies, thank you so much for sharing.
I'm sorry, Keisha. Valisa, did you, I apologize if I missed it, but did you state your mother's name?
I didn't, and I was going to say, wait a minute, we saying names. I'll tell you her name.
Yeah, it's very important to, what is it?
Dr. Emma Turner.
Thank you, yes.
Dr. Emma Turner. All right, thank you. But I think one thing that I really appreciate about us all sharing who our own Sheroes are is just to see that, you can be a Shero where you are, just being who you are. to someone. So the call to action for all of you joining us today is be a hero where you are. And that simply means being a person that comes through no matter what, who is there in the good times and bad, who does good without any expectation or any repayment. You just want to be there for your friends, your family, and for your community. Christopher Reeves gave a very great quote about this. He said, a hero is an ordinary individual who finds the strength to preserve and endure in spite of overwhelming obstacles. A hero is an ordinary individual who finds the strength to, and that probably should be persevere and endure in spite of overwhelming obstacles. So we all have it in us to be a hero, because we are all people, right? We all have a role to play. We change the world every day just for being in it. I want to thank you for joining us for another HeadWraps podcast about Sheroes today. This podcast was presented by Black Women Work. And please visit our website at www.blackwomenwork.com. Thank you. Say bye, ladies.
Bye.
Everybody.
Wakanda forever.
Yes.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
right.
All of